shall not eat of it, because that is the phrase I want to focus on, because this is the same phrase Satan picked up Eve, when he said, "They will surely not die, for God knows that in the day that they eat of it, then their eyes will be opened, and they will be like gods, knowing good and evil." God's there with a little g. 748. And you know, most people when they hear this verse they focus on, "You will be like gods," which sounds great, but they don't see the next phrase. That says, "know good and evil." It is a much more powerful phrase, with the word know being a very underrated term, and in this context, it means an involuntary and automatic way of knowing something. Its true meaning in the original Hebrew is used to extend it to our subconscious mind, which means that our subconscious makes decisions for us and sometimes against us, and reacts in a much more dramatic so that we can be at peace within ourselves. Our subconscious mind is that part of us that knows and recognizes and reacts immediately and automatically to any act that has been committed to us or that has been committed by us to another person. I'll give you an example. If we witness some act or action, our brain automatically thinks it was good or bad. We can't help it, because we are like gods, little g, we know good and evil, we can't help it. And this whole process is well known to us, we call it our conscience. And we all know how our conscience can eat at us for one reason or another, particularly when we consider that there has been an injustice, whether that injustice has been committed against us, or we have committed an injustice against another person. And when our conscience is disturbed, it wants, no, demands that things be put right to give us that freedom of inner peace, and to do this our conscience wants, or is seeking a certain revenge, or something like that, to put the records in order. Then, our brain automatically activates and starts seeking and planning revenge with a certain amount of anger driving it. Now, come on, we've all done this to some extent, it's human nature, it's normal, and they've even made great movies about it, and my favorite revenge story is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. I'm sure you know that. Think about it, how many movies have you seen and where the main theme is someone taking revenge for some kind of injustice? And where does this need for revenge take us? Because in both cases there is anger in our hearts and an unhealthy determination to attack someone in some way and give them a piece of our mind in a way that says don't mess with me, or in the event that we do something wrong, we want to have the opportunity to tell the world, I didn't mean for that to happen. And deep down, that cannot be good for both us and the other person. We are in crisis with ourselves, and until things are resolved, our inner peace within us is gone. And now 749. Thinking goes to see our internal reasoning has changed, and we make decisions with our normal character decisions that are sometimes harmful to ourselves. Come on, we're all familiar with the phrase, don't cut off your nose to mess up your face, and I'm sorry to say that many of us have done it at some point in our lives. I'm sorry to say, but as I said before, that is the normal human process, that is how the world works, and we wonder if there is an alternative, but an alternative that works. Well, we see it, and we see Jesus doing that this morning. As he hung on that cross in agony, Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Forgiving people. Now let's see how this is put into practice at Calvary that day, and to do so, I want to look at the scene from Jesus' point of view as he hung on the cross, which is slightly different from the point of view of the disciples. We read about, in the Bible, Jesus would see everyone present that day. He would see from his personal point of view. He would see the great multitude made up of the many different factions of him. Two thieves next to him. He would see the two thieves next to him crucified, one of them sorry for their offenses, and the other proud, because he did it his way. Roman soldiers. He would see the Roman soldiers there, soldiers unconcerned about his suffering, or his agony on the cross, or the truth about who Jesus was. They were hardened by this, they were just following orders to make sure he was crucified. And while he died, he would see them playing dice and betting on his clothes. Pilate and his officers. He would see Pilate and his officials, an ambitious politician who was willing to deliver an innocent man into the hands of a malicious mafia, to save his own office from him. Herod, the puppet king. I would see Herod, the puppet king who thought Jesus was some kind of magician, and who secretly wanted to recruit Jesus for himself, and as his power, for his own purposes. The Jewish leaders and the scribes and Pharisees. I would also see the Jewish leaders and the scribes and Pharisees, so proud and arrogant, so prejudiced, so righteous, gloating in the success of their crucifixion, because Jesus did not fit their idea of how he should be the coming Messiah. 750. The howling mob, the paid instigators. There was also the howling mob, the instigators in the crowd, the mob that came to curse him, mock him, and torment him, and who were paid to do it, who were paid to demand his execution. The spectators, the rubber collars. And there must also be an element within the crowd whom we would classify as the spectators, the rubber collars, present just to see what was happening so they could report back and say I was there. Disciples and their followers. But there were also people in the crowd who were followers of Jesus. Followers who were totally powerless to act or do anything. These included Jesus' own disciples, friends and family, who were invisible in the crowd for fear of their lives. Genuine people. And further back in the crowd there must have been genuine people, those who knew that this was a travesty, and that Jesus was a good man, and that he was being punished unjustly. We the future. And finally, you could add us to that crowd, as our hearts watch this past event, horrified by the injustice committed against our Lord and King. What would Jesus say to so many people? So, on the cross, despite his pain, despite his anguish, despite the horrible people in front of him, despite the sincere and honest people in the crowd, what would Jesus say to everyone at the same time? Jesus said from the heart, Father, forgive them for they do not know what they are doing. And I hope to give you an idea of why he said that. One, for himself. First, for himself, Jesus knew what he was doing. He knew he had to die to save people, to save the world from its sins, because he knew this was the only way to do it. But for if perhaps a little bit of resentment building up in his heart, a little bit of feeling unappreciated by those who falsely condemned him, he forgave them, thereby freeing himself from any thoughts of revenge that might have come to his heart. And thus way it remained, free to love them and die for them in this horrible way. After all, Jesus was human, he was just like you and me. 2. To those who harmed him. 751. Secondly, Jesus also forgave those who wanted harm to come to him. For him, as I said, it was never about revenge, it was never about getting revenge, since he knew that these people would get what they deserved from him, one day without his help, and this is important. If we are hell-bent on seeking revenge of some kind, or some kind of retribution, we will never find it with hatred in our hearts. We can only achieve peace if we can forgive those who have harmed us or wish to harm us, releasing the pain they are causing us. And we can only do it by forgiving, whether they ask for it or not. It's not about letting them go with what they've done for us, or forgetting about it. It's about protecting ourselves from the harm we do to ourselves by harboring anger, hatred, and deliberate revenge. And another point on this topic, when we are engaged in this type of crusade, we do it alone without God, or should I say, we do not give God the opportunity to resolve the situation. What I'm saying here is that God will never interfere with our own wills. We have to invite him in, and we can only do that if we let go of the crusade that we forgive and turn it over to him. I'm not saying for a second that this is easy, because it's not an easy option like many people like to portray. You know, saying things like apologizing is a sign of weakness. No, and not much. The ability to forgive requires strength of character to overcome a situation. In fact, I see people who cannot forgive as weak and ineffective. True forgiveness is for the strong, and it makes us even stronger. When we say I'm sorry, please forgive me. And you know, even if the other person doesn't forgive us, we are automatically forgiven. Anyway, why? Because our hearts are sincere. Our hearts have changes, and with that everything changes. As soon as we say we are sorry, we are instantly forgiven. Look at our purity prayers that we say every Sunday. Every time we say that prayer, we are instantly forgiven if we really mean it. Anyway, back to those horrible people in the crowd. I'm sure some of them will one day realize what they did wrong. And how comforting it would have been for them to hear these words from Jesus. Father, forgive them, because they don't know what they are doing. Although long after the event. 3. To those who loved him. And thirdly, Jesus said, Father, forgive them, to those who are, and it must have been